Ear Hustling Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ear Hustling Podcast with James and Eric. James, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing mighty fine. How about you, sir?
You know what? I can't complain, sir. It's another beautiful day in Wayne County.
Even if you did complain, who's gonna listen?
Well, I'm pretty sure that there'd be some folks that would listen, like you for starters.
Well, I have a mute button, so I'm not afraid to use it.
Well, that's okay. I'm pretty sure Pinky will listen to me at least for a couple of minutes. James, I'm pretty excited about today's show. So, we've been planning this. This is something that I've been wanting to discuss ever since COVID-19 hit. It's concerning financial planning. And we have a dynamic guest all the way from Los Angeles, California. Sir, are you ready for me to do her intro so we can go ahead and talk money with Jen?
I am ready, man. I want to hear this. I want to hear what Jen has to say.
Outstanding, as do I and all of America. So our guest today is Jen Fontanella. She's from Los Angeles, California. Jen is a former financial advisor and now a certified money coach. She's also a speaker and a best-selling author. She just published her 6th book, Do Before I Do, which encourages couples to have conversations about money that many don't have. Over the last 15 years, she has worked with such organizations as the Walt Disney Company, Warner Brothers, Target, Goodwill, and the United States Air Force, and has appeared on radio and television programs, also podcasting, and she also blogs. She shares her money management experience and knowledge. Jen loves working with energizing entrepreneurial women and helps them master their money and mindset so they can create lasting and one second, I'm sorry. She empowers basically everybody to gain clarity, hope, and confidence to create an incredible financial future. So Jen, I'm sorry that I tripped over your intro.
All right.
Right, so I apologize about that. But I am so excited to have you. Welcome. I know that you normally would be residing out over in LA, but you are in Denver, Colorado, right?
I am. And thank you for having me. Super excited to be here with you both and everybody else that's joining us.
Not a problem. And so if you don't mind, we're just going to go ahead and dive right into the questions, unless there's some questions or some feedback that you would like to give us.
Now let's get right to it.
All right. So one of the questions that I have for you is, why do you have such a passion about being a money coach?
Well, before I got into financial services over 15 years ago, I was actually a graphic designer, and it was very lucrative and I enjoyed it, but 2 pivotal things happened. I wanted to travel and I wanted to realize some dreams. And in fact, one of the pivotal moments was that a friend of mine was getting married in Hawaii and I needed to take time off, and you know how that goes. And so I found out from the company that I was with at the time that in order to get 3 weeks of vacation, I was going to have to work 8 years. I'm like, 8 years? I don't think so. So that was the first one. The second one was realizing that even though I was making great money at the time in my early 20s, I didn't know what to do with it. And I realized I didn't learn how to manage it. I knew how to make it, but I didn't know where to put it. And then I realized if I felt this way and I went to college, how many other people just in general do not have any financial literacy or education of what to do with their money? And so that got me started on this journey to get licensed and figure it out, and also for myself, but to help other people do it, because I know how confusing this can be, and it doesn't have to be. And so, it's become my passion and my mission to help people understand that they can learn how to manage their money as well as building wealth.
Okay, very good. Another question that I had, how does one get contracted by the United States Air Force?
I actually had a friend who was he was high ranking, and so that part I don't know, but I do know that he asked me. He's like, "Hey, can you come in and talk?" So of course I said yes, and actually that was a 3.5 hour workshop, which was it was long, but when you sit there and you see the faces of the people that you're speaking to, and you're talking about all kinds of things about money, about buying a house, about debt, credit, investments, and all those different topics, you start to realize how thirsty people are for this information, because we are not taught majority of us are not taught this stuff in school. And so a lot of people are seeking that knowledge and want that information.
Okay. You mentioned a lot about managing your mindset. So can you just kind of explain exactly what does that mean?
Yeah, so when we talk about money mindset, what that means is that it includes the attitudes, the beliefs, the experiences you have when it comes to money. And so let's see, like take for example, how many of you have heard of this one is so common, money doesn't grow on trees,
Oh yeah.
or money is the root of all evil. You know, you hear these different phrases, and whether that's been passed down from a parent, a teacher, or somebody in your life, or whatever the case may be, those types of things are, they enter your brain and then they become part of your mindset. So then the way that you look at money and the way that you manage it and approach it, that becomes what you start to say, because that's what you grew up with. And so, when I'm talking about managing your money, yes, there's that aspect and that component of how do I plan this? How do I manage this? What investments do I choose? How do I save for money? How do I get out of debt? Those are what I call the logistics, right? The logistics, the practicals, and things like that. And everybody needs to learn that because it's important. But I really feel that the problem goes deeper than that. And so, because if it was just merely, okay, do a spreadsheet and everybody's problems would be solved when it comes to their money, think about it. Everybody could just go to Google, download a budget, and everything would be fine, right? But is that the case? No, it's not. So it doesn't matter that you get the education. It doesn't matter that you sit at a workshop. The other part of it is the lack of implementation. You could absorb information. And so this is another thing where I hear people say, like, money, I mean, knowledge is power. No, implementing the knowledge is power, because you can learn, but if you don't do anything with it, you're not going to go anywhere and you're going to stay in the same place. And so going back to the question, the other side of it is the money mindset. So I think this is the part where it's missing. And so that's one of the things I help people with, to understand, where did your money beliefs come from? Where's your money mindset at? So are you saying these things because they're very limiting beliefs? So sometimes somebody may feel like, well, I don't deserve that. Well, I can't make that much money because I didn't go to college. So, there's all these phrases that people say all the time, and we don't realize how that is affecting your mindset, which is your money mindset. That people don't realize how that is affecting even the way you make money or your ability to make more. And so I want to challenge you out there, if you're listening to this, if you are seeing that you're in that situation, ask yourself, what are the lies that you're feeding yourself? What are the phrases in your mind that you're saying? Do you have a negative relationship with money or a positive one? Do you look, and here, I'll give you an example. When I say positive relationship with money, I could give you an example of saying, like, oh, I feel that I deserve all the abundance that's coming to me. I can choose to enjoy the money that I make. I have joy because of the opportunities that come to me in the form of money. So you can just feel it already. It has a very positive feeling to it, right? When it's negative, but when it's negative, I mean, think of how many, negative mindset we hear. Like I said earlier, money is the root of all evil. First off, that's a misquoted scripture from the Bible. That's not how it goes. It's
The love of money.
Exactly. Thank you. So that's one. Or money doesn't grow on trees. Or be grateful that you have a job. It's almost like a limiting feeling that you don't deserve more, that you can't attain more, that you should just be okay with the status quo, that you should just be okay with what you have. And that's it. It's almost like you're being told that you're almost greedy for wanting more. But why is that? And it shouldn't be that way, because even in the Bible, it even talks about how there was so much wealth. And God was, he blessed people with that wealth. So how can somebody take that love of money is the root of all evil? That is it. But it's when people misquote things, and when we have this negative attitude towards money, we have to really evaluate the conscious relationship that we have with our money and how we look at it. Like, here's another one, do you look at your taxes and grumble, go like, oh, I hate this, I have taxes to pay? Or do you look at it like, I'm thankful that I have this because this means I made this much revenue. I've been blessed with all this money and I do have to pay these taxes, but I was blessed with the money that I was able to produce. and this is the result of it. So it's approaching things from a different perspective. And when we don't have that money mindset down correctly, people don't realize. I think it's because, again, my goodness, if budgeting wasn't taught in school, I mean, for sure, the psychology section of it definitely wasn't. And so I think that's so important for people to understand that those two things are so important, that there's the logistic and practical part of it, but also analyzing how you're approaching your money mindset. How are you looking at things when it comes to your money? Do you have a negative or a positive relationship with it?
Jen, that's a great response. And I want to ask you a question here as well. So what do you say to a person that looks at it the other way? I didn't have much when I was a kid. My parents couldn't provide to me. Now I'm providing away. Now I want to shower myself with these lavish gifts or whatever the case would be. What do you say to that person, as well as how do you change that money mindset?
That is such a great example. I'm so glad you brought this up. So, one of the things I do in the money coaching is I help people take a look at their money history, or we call it a money story or money bio. And basically what we do is I have the client write out everything that happened, that as far back as they can remember from childhood, anything that had to do with money. It could be as simple as, I remember my mom gave me 50 cents and I ended up going to the candy store and I bought a piece of gum. It could be something that simple. And so what happens is, as somebody is outlining all the different events that they can recall, and then I go over it, I can identify certain patterns. Okay, this is a recurring pattern, or okay, this is where the first onset of guilt is setting in. Or it could be in the situation that you mentioned, that, hey, why am I spending all this money? Because, I remember my mom was constantly telling me we can't afford it. I grew up poor. And so there is some validity to it. I think it's important to acknowledge where you came from and not to ignore the past. But it also shouldn't be the excuse for you to be frivolous with your money, especially now, don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't buy those things, okay? So what I will say to that is, but it has to be within reason. So if you are ending up in situations where you're not paying your bills, you're behind, your credit's going down, when you start having a negative impact in the way that you're managing your money and your responsibilities are not being taken care of, then we have an issue here. Now we have a problem. So if it starts to go into that area, then we need to evaluate, hey, are we going a little crazy with buying these things because we're justifying what happened in the past? Now, if that's not the case, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because if you are being responsible and you are taking care of your needs, your family's needs, you're feeding everybody, you have your investments and your insurance in place and all the different things that need to be established to create a solid financial plan and foundation, then I have no problem with somebody feeling like, hey, I want to buy a nice purse. Hey, I want to treat myself to the spa. So it's not me saying, no, you shouldn't spoil yourself, because I really, really believe that self-care, self-love is such a strong thing to have in your life. And I think, especially in our culture where we're constantly hearing hustle, hustle, hustle. And then you hear a lot of financial gurus saying, like, take out all your expenses and, make it down to like beans and rice. I mean, that's kind of like the feeling I get when I see some people give this advice, where it almost sounds like you have to strip down your life to poverty. And I don't believe in that either. I think there needs to be a balance. Like, okay, so if it takes you a little longer to get out of debt, I'm okay with that, as long as it's within reason, in terms of like, you're still taking care of some stuff. But goodness, if you want to have that nice fancy cappuccino, treat yourself maybe once a week, not every day. But that's what I'm saying, within reason, as long as your responsibilities are still being taken care of, I think it's okay. I think sometimes a lot of the advice out there comes to this point where, like, it almost feels like you're being told not to enjoy life. I mean, what is the point to go through the financial stuff that you're trying to achieve if you're going to be miserable along the way? I'm not saying that you can't sacrifice some things, and you might need to, depending on what kind of financial rut you cause yourself to get into. But to strip every joyful event or moment, I don't think that's the way to go either. So there has to be this balance. But to sum it up, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge our history and what we went through as children, and even what did we learn from our father? What did we learn from our mother? And what are some of the things that are self-actualized in our experiences that create the way that we treat our money and approach our money and the kind of relationship we have with money?
All right, very good.
So
I'm sorry,
one
Jen,
last,
go ahead.
yeah, no problem. Excuse me one second here. One last thing. So it's funny you mentioned something, Jen, is finding a happy median. And I think that unfortunately is open to your own interpretation. Not your own, but each individual. Because someone could easily say, like you said, all I'm doing is going to work and paying my bills, and I'm not having any fun. Who wants that kind of life? Who wants to choose that kind of life? So where do you find that happy middle ground? And I think that's the most interesting thing. Is that something you help clients with as well, or?
Yeah, I can. And basically it boils down to creating a plan, a spending plan. I know y'all don't like the word budget. We call it the B word. So we'll call it the spending plan. And you really do need to have this thing outlined. So you know where every dollar, every penny needs to go. Because let's face it, when we don't have that, you end up with more bill than money at the end of the month. And that's not a good place to be. I have conversations with people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't get paid till another 2 weeks. And the bill's already due. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, how did you even get into this situation? And so when you have a plan in place and you have the spending plan in place and you know where dollars are supposed to go, you know where your bills are supposed to go, your financial obligations and responsibilities, when there is an assignment for every dollar and those things are taken care of, then you can see like, okay, do I even have any discretionary money? Is there anything left over? What can I allow myself to enjoy? But we can't just say like, well, I deserve it because I don't want a miserable life, because you're just going to create a bigger hole. So, at the end of the day, you're going to have to ask yourself, how much gratification, how much of that is important to you versus you being in a better sound financial space? So you're going to have to really have that come to Jesus meeting with yourself and ask yourself like, hey, you know what, if you want to blow the budget and spend all the money and because you want to feel better that way and then just continue to be in debt or continue to be in a financial rut, that's a choice that everybody has to make. But you have to have like long-term tunnel vision if you really want to have a better financial future, because I'm telling you, there are people that are approaching that retirement age. And I see this very, very often where people are realizing, man, I wish I started earlier. I made a lot of stupid mistakes. I wish I did better. And they're looking at the younger people, the younger generation, saying like, don't do what I did. Start saving and don't make stupid mistakes. I mean, these are conversations and words that I hear often. And it's sad because time is the one commodity that we cannot make more of. You can make more money. You can figure out how to do those things, but time, it's gone. It's the one thing you cannot make more of in this life. And so, it really just comes down to you learning how to be disciplined and creating a plan. And if you just can't, do that, and you're finding yourself running into the same wall where I can't stick to it, then there's probably some root causes in your money story that you might not be aware of. And that's some of the things that could be uncovered, because that's what ends up happening. You don't realize some of these patterns that you're repeating come from something that happened in your childhood or somewhere along in the past. And sometimes when you're able to finally do that, you'll be able to uncover like, oh, this is why I'm not saving. Or this is why I keep blowing my money every time I get it as soon as possible. I've seen the opposite. Some people don't even want to part with the money. I had a client that was like that, who didn't even want to pay the bills. Even though he knew he needed to pay the bills, he would wait till the last minute or get into this last minute situation. And it was like, he just couldn't part with it because he was so used to losing it. So it had the adverse effect where he didn't want to let it go. So I've seen it both ways. And so it's interesting because when you find out what happened in their past, you're like, okay, I understand now. I see why your history that's repeating over and over is manifesting now in the present time based on how I see you're making your current present day financial decisions.
Last question I had, Jen, before Eric moves on. Sorry, Eric. Jen, you're giving a lot of information, and I'm things are just popping up as you're going.
No, go for it. Go for it.
As far as that bead word, as far as the budget, do you recommend treating it like the Bible? It's etched in stone. Don't change it. or do you recommend it's okay, or do you say it's okay to be flexible as long as you get everything taken care of?
Yeah, I think it's important to be flexible because things come up. And so we have to be realistic. We live here on planet Earth, right? And things happen. And so there are going to be times when a situation happens, it can throw things off. And as much as we don't want that to happen, we can't ignore that. But this is why we have things like an emergency fund in place. So we can't make it the excuse of, well, I got to blow the budget because this happened and now I got to get the money from the, you know, the clothing budget or the food budget or whatever part of the budget. But it, you know, that's what's so important about having an emergency fund, because those dollars are specifically set aside for the unexpected. So, you know, and I think too, what's important to note is in the beginning, when you're learning how to track this, in the beginning, you, especially if you haven't tracked your habits, you know, I've had people do an exercise where, okay, I want you to list down the things you bought every day, if, you know, say the receipts, and it's amazing. Everybody always says, I can't believe how much I spent. And the biggest area that people spend money on without even thinking is food and drinks and going out. Because, you know, especially if you're not dealing with cash, you're just swiping and you know, like, okay, yeah, just, you know, keep my tab open and things like that. And that could be very dangerous. And so in terms of you not tracking what's going out. So, you know, when you have that emergency fund, those are meant for those unexpected events. That's why it's called an emergency. And it's an emergency fund meant for not, oh, I need to buy shoes, or, you know, this is talking about like, you know, I need new brakes, or you know, the water heater went out. And then it's important to replenish that emergency fund when you have the means and the capability to. But, you know, it have grace. It can be, and it needs to be flexible because there's things that are going to come up. But you will also, you know, when you start to track and you start to see the habits, you'll know like, oh, okay, I realize I'm spending so much on entertainment, or, oh my goodness, I'm spending too much on, you know, clothing or whatever it is. Or sometimes it's food. Sometimes people realize like, I need to meal plan better so that I can be better about the food I buy and plan it for the week. You know, things like that. So the better prepared you are, that's where you're going to help yourself eliminate a lot of this like extra dollars slipping, you know, away here and there. So, you know, it can be flexible because things will come up, but the better you are about planning and the more you do it, you'll see after a few months, you'll start to adjust it. Like, okay, it's almost like, you know, I don't know if this is a good example, but like concrete settling, you know, it's still not totally dry, but after a few days, okay, this is where it's supposed to be. And that sometimes takes a few months in order for you to realize the patterns that fit with your family's needs.
All right. James, do you have any more follow-ups before I go to the next question?
Nope, I'm good, sir.
All right, thank you. I'm going to, actually, there was one question that I wanted to ask, but I think that you kind of alluded to earlier. This is an interesting one, at least from my perspective. Do men and women manage money differently, in your opinion?
Oh, yes. This is a great question. I'm glad you're asking it. Definitely, there are big differences. And this is, I'm trying to think of the most summarized way I can describe it. So for example, when it comes to investments, okay, so there's been studies on this where men are more willing to take risk. So for example, that's a perfect one where they're not afraid to be on the more aggressive side when it comes to picking a portfolio or what kind of funds do I need to be invested in. They're more willing to take risk, as opposed to women where we tend to be more conservative. That actually isn't the case for me, but in general, that typically has been shown in studies where women seem to be more risk averse. They want to be more conservative. And so, you know, when you look at that, it's interesting because there's also an effect too on the possible gains when it comes to looking at somebody's portfolio, because obviously, you know, the risk reward concept. So, but it's interesting to see that men are more willing to take that risk when it comes to, okay, I'm going to invest in this new deal. I'm going to invest in this, you know, aggressive portfolio. Now, is that always a good thing? Maybe not, because sometimes, you know, when you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to participate in this deal. You know, my buddy, you know, told me about this thing, and we all have that buddy that tells us these things, and then you want to jump in and do it. But then that's like, wait, slow down. Did you do the research? Did you really vet this? What does it look like? And so, there's pros and cons to both, so that's one area where, they do handle money differently. I will also mention too, from a society perspective, men and women also do treat money differently because of the social norms that have been placed on us. So for example, it's typically white patriarchal society perspectives that have been placed on us. And so when you think about that as a woman, and even in this country, we didn't vote when men did. We didn't we didn't have the same rights. We couldn't even own a home. Our husbands had to own the home, and we couldn't own in our own name. We couldn't even open a bank account. It wasn't even until the 60s. So from that perspective, when you think about it, when you have those types of things being put on you from the way that the world is treating you, it's going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect on, oh, is it okay? It's almost like as a woman, you feel like, oh, is it okay? Do I do this now? Do I have permission to do this now? And so, I think it's not as blatantly obvious, but it was interesting when I learned about that we have to be aware that that is the history of women in this country, of how money was, how it came into our possession, and what we were and not allowed to do. And so, so I realized that there's been a change not recently, but, obviously in the more recent decades, where women are realizing, I need to understand why I'm buying this, or how do I handle my money? And this is why I did write the book, because I was, in a lot of workshops, I tell women, you have to take control of this, because one or two things are going to happen. Either your husband or partner is going to die, or he's going to leave you. And at that point, you really are not in a position to ask, like, hey, that one bank account we had, how do I access it? Yeah, those conversations are probably not going to take place, especially if it was an ugly separation. And so, I try to tell women, learn how to be empowered, where you need to understand how this works. And something that I say very often is like, stop saying he handles all of that. He takes care of all of that. And there have been some times too, where it's the opposite, where some of the women say like, yeah, my husband doesn't even look at the money. I'm the one that takes care of everything. And so I think it's really, really important that, yes, there's differences in the way we approach it. Yes, there's a lot of psychological, things that have affected the way we approach our money. But again, my thing is that once you're aware of it, that's when you can take action and do something about it. And so if you are in a position where you've always allowed your partner to shoulder the management of the money in your household, I think it's time that you really step back and come together and realize we need to talk about this. We need to both be on the same page, because if something happens to either one of us, we need to be in a position where we know what to do and not feel lost and confused. And I've had to help people that were in that position, and it is not a pretty picture.
As if that time is not stressful enough, now add that conversation on top of it that you can't clearly have with your loved one. So definitely can understand the value there, Jan. One thing I wanted to mention to you as well, or ask you, is in our call that we had a couple weeks back, we kind of talked about this lightly, but one thing that I would like for you to discuss with the listeners as well is different ethnicities and the way that different ethnicities look at money. So please.
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic. And definitely there is a big gap. There's a big gap. There's and I hate using the word minority. I'm going to use it for the sake of, distinguishing minority between white and the rest of us, people of color, whatever term you want to use for the simplicity's sake of just this conversation. And there's a lot of talk where I feel like a lot of people say like, well, white people know how to make wealth, and how come we don't know how to do this? And so I let's be real. I hear that stuff all the time. And my question is, when the information is brought to you, or when you do have an opportunity to learn about it, do you take advantage of that? I see a lot of free financial workshops all the time, and I see the numbers, how many people are participating, and it's disheartening, because I see a lot of people in a very stressful situation where they're struggling. And then I ask myself, what are you doing in your life right now to up your financial literacy game? Are you learning? Are you tuning into podcasts that talk about money? Are you meeting with professionals? Are you actively seeking the knowledge and participating in the knowledge that's being shared so that you can change your financial situation. And a lot of times I don't see that. And it's frustrating because I want people to win. I want people to do better when it comes to their finances. You know, the other things too that I've seen, you know, and unfortunately in the lower income demographics, and these are all based on statistics because I'm doing a project with some churches, and I was analyzing some statistics that dealt with different cities as well as different ethnic groups. And, you know, it's really disheartening again when I see, you know, the Hispanic and the Black community at the bottom of the statistics, you know, but at the same time, you know, one of the things that I'm also realizing is like, that also has to tie in with income levels and the types of jobs that people hold. So it's just, you know, very, very intertwined why you see certain statistics in certain cities, in certain ethnic groups. But yes, you know, even the approach when, you know, when you look at how do people want to manage their money, I think it's really interesting, like even culturally, you can see there's certain groups that are more willing to invest and do something with their money. And then there's certain groups that just want to spend it. And there's a little bit of everybody in every ethnic group. So I'm not trying to single out anybody, but it's just, it's interesting to see that some people view it very important. Like, I want a better financial future. I want to do great. And then there's some people that like, hey, YOLO, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to buy whatever I want. I don't care. And I'm not thinking about the future. And that's what's sad. And, you know, the other thing that's important to note too, is that it's not even just about you. When you take it a step further, we need to also think about generational wealth. What are you passing on to your children? Because there's also some stigmas that I've seen in some societies and some groups where like, well, I don't need to take care of them. I worked for my own money and they can fend for themselves. And it's so sad because when I've tried to put a plan together for some people and, you know, the topic of life insurance comes up, you know, for example, I have heard that sometimes where people are just like, no, I don't need that. They can figure it out. They can just throw me in a box. That I don't need life insurance to have a burial. I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, so you don't, you know, in my head, I'm thinking, so you don't care about your wife and your children, you know, and it's sad because it's really selfish. It's really selfish when I hear that, but that's such a missed opportunity for people to create that generational wealth. You know, you see people that, and you hear people say like, hey, you know what, how do these other people do it? How do they create this generational wealth? Well, it all starts with you being open-minded first, to being open to these concepts, to these strategies, and then putting yourself in a position to learn it, and then not just learn it, but implement it. And then understand, how is this going to help future generations? How is this going to help your kids? And then how is this going to help your kids' kids, your grandchildren? And that's how it happens, because there's so many different ways to do this, but it starts with you changing your mindset, being open-minded, to listen to these things, to listen to these strategies, to being open-minded to hearing, how does this money work? How do these strategies work? How is this going to work for me and my family? But a lot of times I want to say, like, I see it in just different people. It doesn't matter what color you are. I see it sometimes where it's that mentality of like, you know what, they got to get their own. I'm the one that's working. Why should I take care of them? They can figure it out. And it's a very sad, poor mentality state. And that's something that we need to change.
So, Jim, what do you say to the person that says, you mentioned about the free financial workshops? What do you say to the person who lacks trust? You know, what are those people really out for? Are they trying to be a predator to me? What do you say to those people with that mindset?
Yes, I want to say, you know what, first off, I understand. There are people that are out there that, regardless if they hold a professional designation or a license, there are predators out there. And the sad thing, and I see this in so many different areas of life, not just in the financial space, but I understand what it is to feel when you're burned and then you don't want to trust anymore. And it's unfortunate. And I'm sorry if that has happened to you. It's happened to me a few times. And so I understand. However, what's the alternative? You can either choose and stay in a place where you can remain the victim. And I'm not discrediting what you went through. I'm not putting down what happened to you, but do you really want to stay there and just hold on to that anger and that shame and what had happened? Or do you want to move forward and figure out, how can I do this smarter? How can I do this better? How can I do the research and vet these people And that's where you're going to do the homework. That's where you're going to ask for referrals. That's where you're going to find out who's this person. And if you can vet and do your homework, trust me, you will find somebody you can trust. You can find somebody that does a good job. You can find somebody that has integrity and is not out to make money on you, but really truly wants to help you. And there are people out there. There are good people out there, but it really is going to come down to two things. You learning to forgive not only that person, but yourself for making that decision, and learning to let that stay in the past, and you deciding to move forward, and then being diligent about doing your due diligence in researching and vetting that person.
Awesome.
Nice. Very good information. I'm sorry, James, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go
No,
ahead.
no, you didn't. I was just saying awesome.
Okay. I've got a question for you, Jen.
Yeah.
You spoke about the top 5 challenges that couples have with money. Would
Yes.
you mind sharing those challenges, please?
Sure. So there's a lot. There's more than 5, but I'm going to pick the top 5.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest challenges is the first one, hands down, communication. Lack of communication, and not only lack of communication, but lack of communicating about money. I think that is the basis of why couples have a very difficult time when it comes to talking about money. Again, it's one of those things, you know, we weren't taught how to communicate. We weren't taught about money. We weren't taught how to do taxes, right? So it falls under that line of like, oh, they didn't teach this to us in school. Why didn't they teach this us? That type of thing. And so when it comes to lack of communication, think about it. There's and you don't know what kind of personality trait you're dealing with sometimes, right? So you might have somebody that is passive aggressive. And then you know, when you're dealing with passive aggressive people, then you just don't get anywhere, right? Because nobody wants to talk. That person's like this. And you know, so, you know, communication is a huge thing. And I think it also goes into the space of being disrespectful. I think we forget how to be kind to our partner. And sometimes when we get into these long talks or what we think is going to become a long talk or a difficult talk, the guard goes up, right? We get defensive, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about? And then then there's no communication. So it kind of just keeps going back and forth where there's disrespect and lack of communication. But I want to encourage you guys, if you are in a situation where you have a partner, you have a spouse, and somebody wants to talk about it, be very mindful of how you're approaching it. Because think about it. If you told me you want to talk about money and I say to you like, oh, what do you want to talk about? Do you already feel encouraged to get into a conversation with me? You're just like, forget it. And when you have that approach, and when that's the attitude that you're going into things, nobody's going to be talking. And then that problem that was trying to be brought up is just going to continue to manifest into this bigger snowball that doesn't get figured out. And it's going to continue to grow and grow and get tucked under the rug. So I think, you know, being disrespectful and lack of communication is hands down huge. I think we need to be very respectful and mindful of like, how are we reacting to our partner when they want to talk about something, and be a good listener. Be a good listener and let that person talk. And then when it's your turn, then it's your turn to express, okay, well, I understand how you feel. This is how I saw it. But it's about being respectful. I think if couples even just got past that point, I mean, leaps and bounds, right, in terms of improving the talk about money. I think the other one too is lack of money dates. So the second one is money dates, not having them. And a money date basically is just a term I use for when couples can just get together. It doesn't have to be this 3-hour deal. It can be 15 minutes. And I would suggest once a week, and getting together and just laying things out on the table and be like, okay, is everything okay? Are we good on the bills? Yeah, everything's on auto pay. Okay, is there anything else coming up that we need to save for, or anything coming up that we need to be aware of? And just kind of doing like a financial checkup. It could be 15 minutes, really, really simple, where you just get together and just make sure. Because how many times have you heard people say like, well, I thought they were going to pay the light bill and then it got shut off. And then I'm now trying to get it back on because there's lack of communication again. But if you were having these money dates, that wouldn't happen because you're on the same page, making sure that your financial management of the household is being taken care of. So that's the second one. The third one I would say is people just don't know what to do. So if it's blind leading the blind, I mean, what are you going to talk about? And I think sometimes, depending if somebody has an ego or if somebody just has, you know, they just don't know, there's this shame. There's this shame like, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know how to manage this. I didn't learn about this. And so when that's present, people don't want to talk. because you don't know what, you don't even know where to start because there's this lack of knowledge. And so this is why it's important to be immersed in financial literacy and get educated. I'm not telling you to become a money expert or, become a certified financial planner, but at least know the basics, at least know the basis of what's going on and a budget, the spending plan, start there. That's very easy. And, when you can have those foundational things worked out and know how to talk about it, I promise you, your household will run so much more smoothly. And the thing is too, when you can improve these first three things, your communication gets better, your relationship will get better because you're not fighting about the money anymore. And so, who doesn't want that? That is one of the biggest reasons why I wrote the book, because I know the kind of situations I got into with my ex-spouse. So that just kind of tells you how that ended. So, I've been there. I totally understand. And so it's so important to have that communication about the money in a very respectful way, making sure you're all on the same page, and then learning how to be prepared and then becoming knowledgeable in the basics of, okay, this is what we need to do. Okay, yes, we're learning about this. How do we implement this? Okay, what's the next step? And that's the thing too, learning how to do it in baby steps, because it can be daunting. It could be a huge, big project as if we're not busy already, but it's so important. There's a saying that says, people will plan more for their family vacation than their financial future for the next 30 years. And it's kind of sad. And I get it because, sometimes this can seem like it's not fun and sexy, but it's your financial future. So it's super important. And so that leads me to the fourth one, where people aren't thinking about their future. Going back to the YOLO mentality, like, well, this is fun, let's go on a vacation. Like, oh, well, this is fun, let's go have dinner with our friends. But we're not thinking about, this is such a key point, and I talked about this last week, opportunity cost. And an opportunity cost is, what could that money have done for you if you didn't spend it on this? Mm. So let's say, for example, you went and had a $200 dinner. And instead of spending it on a $200 dinner, what could that $200 have bought you? Or what could you have invested in? Or what could you have saved it for? I'm not saying, again, that you shouldn't do $200 dinners. I'm just giving you an example of, that's an opportunity cost, where you start to see, like, what if I had, what would I have lost out on, especially the compounding interest. If I had invested $200, what would the true loss be? It's not $200. It's the compounding of the $200 versus me spending it one time here. And so when we don't think about opportunity costs, and we're not seeing how it affects our daily decisions when it comes to our money, we're losing out in funding our future. We're losing out in being properly prepared so that we can have money in the future. Because at the end of the day, it comes to cash flow. Are you going to have cash flow when you want to stop working? And this is exactly why there are people out there that can't stop working. So, that's another thing that is a challenge with couples, that you really need to think about your future and how you're going to manage it and the decisions you're going to make. And that, again, I know this sounds like a broken record, but it always comes back down to the spending plan. If you don't have a roadmap, where are you going? You're just kind of aimlessly wandering, hoping that it's going to work out. And I'm sorry, but hope is not a financial plan. And, then the fifth one, I kind of talked about it already, is, I think it's important for couples to understand their money story, their bio, and their history. So, for example, let's say the man was so used to seeing the mom doing the bills and balancing the checkbook, and she was running the household. The mom was running the household with the finances, right? And that's what he saw growing up. Now, his wife, on the other hand, saw dad do everything. And so dad was managing everything. Dad went to work, dad took care of everything, and bills just got paid. So can you imagine these two, they get together and they already have opposite role models in terms of who took that place. This was mom, this was dad. And so what do you think happens? These two have an unrealistic expectation of them taking care of the one task that they didn't see their parent doing. And that's where you get these clashes, because it's like, well, my mom took care of that. Well, I didn't take care of that. My dad took care of that. And so now you start to see like this argument of like, who's supposed to do what? And then nothing gets done, or it gets done, but now there's this bitterness because people didn't stop to think about, how did I grow up? Well, what did you see growing up? How did your parents handle money in your household? What did you see? What kind of money mindset or money affirmations or statements did you hear growing up? And so when we can stop to find out what that is and what our spouse can share with us or a partner can share with us about how they grew up, it just gives us such a more deeper understanding of where they're coming from. And then it opens up the lines of communication, because now you're realizing like, oh, this is why he expects me to do this. Oh, this is why he doesn't like that, because he saw his dad gambling the money, and this is why he doesn't want to invest. He just wants to hoard the money. But it's like, I think couples need to have that talk where you start to unpack and analyze, like, hey, you know, what did you see your parents do when you were growing up? But when you don't do that and you're coming into the relationship, you can obviously see where there's a lot of clashing. And, you know, I always say, you know, people only look at when they get with somebody, like the emotional aspect, like, oh, we get along so well and we finish each other's sentences, but people fail to see if they're financially compatible.
Mm.
Wow, that's an excellent point. I never really thought about it. Oh, you're cute. Yeah, but you know what, man, that just really just opened up my eyes on so many things, and just like self-judging in my household. My mom did it. My mom worked a part-time job, and my dad worked, and he basically just he didn't even cash the check. He gave the check to my mom, and then my mom gave him an envelope. Um, and it's like you see it, but you're kind of oblivious to it, because as children, we were never really into on how the budget actually worked in the house. We saw it, but we didn't know the workings of it. So some of my own inadequacies, to be honest with you, have just came to light just by listening to you explain that. So I definitely appreciate that. And
Oh, you're
we've got,
so welcome.
and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's like a ton of questions that I actually have.
Yeah, shoot away.
But no, because otherwise you'll be here all day. I don't think you
Pick
want
one.
me to-
Pick one.
and I don't think you want me to do that. But one thing that I have in terms of like financial discipline,
Mm,
what recommendations would you have for a person to self-discipline?
yes. You know, I'm going to go back to the budget, the spending plan. If you don't have your North Star, if you don't have that plan in place, how can you be disciplined? So for example, I'm going to use working out, because, you know, every time it's the beginning of the year, everybody wants to get in shape. And, you know, I feel like on social media, you know, losing weight and getting in shape, that's always like a hot topic, because everyone can relate to that. So let's just say I don't have a gym membership, or I don't have any equipment. I have no routine of what I'm going to work out. Do you think I'm going to be disciplined in waking up every day if I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing today? Right? You don't know. You don't have a plan in place of what routine, you know, and I use that because I'm extremely disciplined when it comes to that area of my life. And so like Monday, I know exactly if I'm doing cardio or weights. I have all the body parts separated in terms of like chest on this day, triceps, legs on this day, shoulders and back. And then I repeat the process, but there's a plan in place. No different when it comes to your money. If you don't have that spending plan in place, how can you be disciplined? You can't be disciplined based on nothing. So once you have that plan in place, then you know, for example, like if you know that you've already exceeded the food budget for the month, and you can divide this, and we're not going to go into these details, but for example, if you divide it bi-weekly and you know that like you've already hit like that halfway point, you have a gauge. Then you know like, oh, okay, well, I have this much space to with the budget. I can purchase these extra things or these other additional things or whatever it is. But if you don't have that gauge, if you don't have that thing helping you stay in, you know, being regulated, I know that sounds like such a harsh word, but how can you be disciplined? You know, so that when that plan is in place, that's exactly what's going to help you stay disciplined. I think it's also important that you have that future goal in mind. If you haven't mapped out goals, I think that's important. Yes, it's important to understand the day-to-day management of things, but you also have to look at the future. What is it? Where is it that you want to go? Or what is it that you want to do in 5 years, in 10 years, in 30 years? And you are probably most likely going to have to bring in a professional, a financial professional, to help you map out these things that can show you what can this look like in the future. You know, I did that earlier with a client today. And when we discovered, like, you keep going at the route you are going, everything's going to stop at age 70. You're not going to have any more money coming in. And this is somebody that was making $250,000 a year. So this isn't just about, oh, I only make $25,000 a year. It doesn't matter what the income level is. The point is, if you don't have that plan in place and you don't know how to project out when things are going to run out in terms of income, it doesn't keep your focus on staying disciplined. Because if I know what the future can look like, it's going to help me understand how do I need to act right now, day to day, so that I'm not blowing my savings plan, so that I'm not messing up this plan, so that I'm not adding 10 more years until I can stop working, if that is your goal. So it really comes back down to the plan, and then having goals in place, and then also understanding what does the future look like? Because if you don't even know what that looks like, how can you even focus on the daily choices that you are making today? So I know I'm saying it to ad nauseum, but you cannot try to put good financial habits in place if you don't even have the strategy and plan to begin with and setting that foundation.
All
Jen,
right. Well,
before we get too far along, excuse me, Eric, I would like for you to share a couple things with us, Jen. One, the name of your book again, and where can we find it, first of all?
Yes, the name of the book is Do Before I Do, and you can just go to www.dobeforeido.com. And actually, I will share a link with you guys, and that you guys can download the first 3 chapters. I'd love to gift that to you. And it just kind of gets you into the right mindset when you're talking about these issues. So it's not a technical book. This was not a book I wanted to write about. This is investing in the compound at 8% rate of return. It's not that kind of book. This is more about how to open those conversations with your partner. And this is also about you taking a look at yourself, because how often is it that we want to point the finger at our partner and blame our partner for why we're in the financial situation that we're in? But really, we have to start from ground zero and take a look at ourselves and our own actions and our own mindset. So I will definitely share the link with you. So that's where you guys can find it within. But the link is going to be, I want to give to you guys the first 3 chapters of that book.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
And the other thing I want to know before we get too far ahead as well, if a listener out there today want to hire Jen, want to talk to her about the services that she offers, where can they find you to get that information as well?
Yes, absolutely. I'm easy to find online. You can reach me on Facebook or Instagram at Jen Money Coach, JEN Money Coach, or you can go to jenmoneycoach.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry. I didn't want to miss out on that.
no, that's okay. I was actually going to allude to that too, because we did have some technical difficulties. But the wonderful thing about this is just because this time has ended doesn't mean this is the last we've seen of Jen. Jen has graciously accepted an invitation from the Ear Hustling Podcast to come on every 3rd Thursday of the month to share more of these wonderful tips and practices with us. So she's going to be premiering on our 10 at 10 segment on the, oh my goodness, why did I just forget the date? It's the third Thursday, which is the 17th. Yep. So September 17th, you will see our 3 smiling faces, but primarily you will be listening to her. So we are very fortunate and we're very appreciative that you've accepted our invitation, and we thank you for that. So we've got loads of questions. If anybody has any, questions out there for Jen, she's already given you the platforms, or you can always post them at the Ear Hustling Podcast page, and we'll make sure that she gets those questions. So, Mr. Montgomery, did you have anything else?
I don't. I like how you said 3rd Sunday like it was communion, but
I'm sorry, church on the brand.
We knew what you meant.
I was just listening to her. She gave us a little bit of Bible. You know what? We have to leave an inheritance for our children and our children's children. So, you know what? We are fulfilling a mandate there. And like I said, another mandate that we're fulfilling is that how can we be trusted to shepherd a lot if we can't shepherd a little? So that, those are some very, very, interesting, points, some eye-opening facts. And like I said, we definitely appreciate it and looking forward to you coming on in a couple of Thursdays.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been
fun. Before I close everything out, Mr. Montgomery, did you have anything?
Man, I don't. I appreciate it, Jen, for being here. I'm definitely looking forward to the 3rd Thursday, and getting more insightful information from you. Definitely looking forward to that.
Thank you.
And Jen, did you have anything you'd like to say in parting?
I just want to say, take a deep breath and be kind to yourself. It's not the typical financial advice, but I think what's so important is that if you're in a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed, take a deep breath and just know that you can do this. Everything is fixable within time. and to forgive yourself, because we've all made mistakes. But I think if you don't start there and learn to forgive yourself first, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to move forward and make better decisions. So just remember that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. To
Nice.
borrow my co-host phrase, it's been from our mouths to your ears, but not really. It's been more from Jen's mouths to our ears, and we definitely appreciate you appearing on the Ear Hustling podcast. And stay safe, America.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.